Hi everyone, welcome to our Club AW Click and Chat. This time we're joined by Miles, who of course you might know as Expired Film Club. He does amazing work on film, shooting sports, and you've also done a bit of music, haven't you? A range of stuff. So it's going to be a really great chat to kind of understand how he does it, the expired films that he uses, and what advice he might give to you guys as well. So let's get cracking, Miles.
Thank you, Amy. Well, first of all, lovely to be here. Lovely to see you all. Thanks for joining. So a very, very brief intro to me. So my name is Miles, but my social media name is @Expired Film Club. Many of you have seen me online. I actually started the account. It was kind of because of lockdown, weirdly. So I've been a photographer and a camera operator. I did a bit of video work as well in the music industry for a long time. And obviously when the pandemic happened, that all ground to a complete halt. So it kind of, in a funny way, gave me a bit of time to pursue film photography as more of a passion than anything. I was furloughed, so it's kind of just kicking our heels as a lot of us were during that time. And so I decided to head to Facebook Marketplace and found myself an old Olympus OM10 that was being sold by somebody close to me where I live here in Oxfordshire. Bought it and bought some film online, and just really fell in love with the entire medium again. I studied photography in sixth form, and we did a little bit of analog photography back then, making prints and stuff in the darkroom, but I hadn't really done it since then. And I'm sure, like all of you here, as soon as I sort of started loading the film and snapping away, I just got the bug instantly. So through that, I started exploring into the world of expired film, which I found and still find extremely fascinating. I love all the old vintage, box designs and canisters and the whole massive range of film stocks that you could get. So I started looking into that and shooting expired film, and then started my social media to kind of, I guess, show off what I was doing and taking people on the journey with me of like all these different expired films I was shooting. And then through that, I'd researched into weird and wonderful old film cameras, and so I sort of started developing a bit of a style, and was very lucky in how quickly my social media accounts seemed to grow. So I got about 1 million followers on TikTok within the first sort of year or so of starting off, which was mind-blowing. It still is to me. I just can't believe it. And so that in turn led to things growing, and quite naturally, I'm a big sports fan myself. So I would always take like a point and shoot just into the crowd at sports games. I'm sure if any of you have tried to get into sports stadiums with professional cameras, it can be quite difficult because the security, they're sort of told that anything that's deemed professional, you're not allowed to take in as a member of the audience. So anyway, I would always take in point and shoots with different expired films or fresh films, and carry on kind of making content when I was going to sports grounds and things like that. And it all just snowballed, really. It's been mad. So the whole kind of professional sports side of things that I've been lucky enough to do on film, I guess my first ever real professional football game that I shot was only back in November when I worked for Fulham Football Club in London, and they invited me to be a photographer at a game against Wolves, which I'll show you some photos of as we get through the thing. But it's all just kind of snowballed from there. And in the last 6 months, I've sort of lived a dream, to be honest. I'm a big Man United fan myself, and I've got to shoot stuff for Manchester United. I've worked with Real Madrid in the past few months. I documented most of the FA Cup for the FA, from the quarterfinal stage onwards in the men's and the women's. And then from that, I've kind of expanded out into different sports as well. So I've been doing recently some tennis. I was in Paris for Roland Garros, the French Open, did some cricket, I've done rugby, I've done the Six Nations. I've done some snooker. I was lucky to shoot the World Snooker Championship final at the Crucible as well. And I'm just loving it, really. So it's great to be here today. And what I thought I might do is just take you through the process I go through when I'm shooting the games like this. But also, I know that expired film is a big part of my kind of presence online, and I shoot it a lot. So I thought maybe if anybody's interested who hasn't shot expired film before, I could tell you a bit about how to get the best out of it, because there are certain things you need to bear in mind with expired film. And again, we'll go through that as we get further on, to bear in mind when you're shooting to get the best out of it. So we'll work through as we go. But for the time being, this is a shot, if you're seeing on screen now. I was at the photography show recently where I saw the lovely folks from Analogue WonderLand there and did a talk on shooting sports on film. And this was the photo that I chose as my kind of favorite photo that I've taken on film at a sports game. So for those of you that aren't interested in football, I won't dwell on it too much, but this is Marcus Rashford for Manchester United, and this is him scoring what was a very crucial goal in the game against Liverpool, who are United's biggest rivals recently, at Old Trafford. And obviously in this photo, what I love to do with sports and the way I try and tell a story with sports, it's interesting when I'm on the touchline, because obviously I'm surrounded by people who are using digital cameras, and when you're on the touchline of a sort of high profile sports game in the stadium, there are designated photographer positions all along the sort of outside of the pitch, and particularly at football, it's behind both goals. That's where you tend to want to be situated. And each of those positions has a hookup with an Ethernet cable that goes straight into the photographer's laptop, which they lay next to them. And then also they have the digital camera, which is tethered directly to the laptop. So literally when you're sat there, the digital photographers at the stadium are snapping away, and when there's a crucial moment that happens, all those photos go straight to their laptop and they give them a very quick edit and they get sent out, and it's immediate. So it's kind of, in a funny way, although it makes my life much more difficult when I'm shooting film at sports, it gives me a bit more freedom, because I'm not being relied on by social media and news outlets and stuff to capture the moment, to get it out straight away. So what I quite like to do is try and tell a bit more of a cinematic story when I'm at a game. So this shot in particular I really love, because it's not the exact moment of him striking that ball and scoring the goal. It's the kind of immediate visceral emotional reaction from the players straight afterwards, and I think it tells so much of a story. What I love about this is you've got Marcus Rashford, the number 10, and to his left, our right hand side, is Alejandro Garnacho, who's another Man United player, and you can just see the emotion in their faces. But for this one, and particularly for me being a Man United fan, I kind of love almost more than Rashford and Garnacho in the foreground here is the background, where you can see again the complete opposite emotional reaction of the Liverpool players from conceding that goal so late in the game. You know, you've got a defender with his hands on his knees looking at the ground, the goalkeeper's on the floor. And so I think as a frame, I really loved how this came out. This was shot, I think it was using a Canon EOS 1V with a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 lens, and I'm pretty sure that the film stock for this would have been Ilford Delta 3200, which is my favorite black and white film for shooting sports in. That's one of the things when you're shooting sport actually to bear in mind, and particularly this was a late afternoon game on a pretty overcast day, so the lighting conditions weren't great. And obviously with sport, it's so fast moving that you want to be able to have nice fast shutter speeds when you're shooting sports. So typically I don't really like to go below a 500th of a second if I can. And so, you know, if you go any lower than that, then as players are running, you start to get that motion blur, which can be creative in some ways, but often, you know, you want it to be nice and clean and sharp. So bearing that in mind, it's always good to have some nice high ISO film in my bag with me. If I'm shooting a day game and it's a nice sunny afternoon, it's not quite so bad, because if there's a lot of light, then I can get away with using like a 200 or 400 ISO film. But for games like this, where it's kind of nighttime, your only illumination really is the floodlights around the pitch, having nice high ISO film is great. So Ilford Delta 3200 is obviously brilliant for that, because I use it at 3200 ISO, which just enables me to get those fast shutter speeds, and then also having a nice fast lens. So this was a 70 to 200 f2.8, also allows me to keep those shutter speeds nice and high, which is great. So this moment, I was very lucky actually, because where I was sat, there were two goals that went in very late in this game, and both of them happened right in front of me, and the players ran directly towards me as they were celebrating, so it was perfect. So that's a shot. Probably what I'd say of all the shots I've taken since I've started shooting film at sports games professionally, I think this is probably my favorite. I've actually got it framed on the wall to my right side. It's the only photo of mine that I've actually got framed in my office. Anyway, so I just chose that as one of my favorites. This is another shot from that game as well, and again, when I was saying about having the faster shutter speeds, it was really important with this. And again, this would have been shot on Ilford Delta 3200. But you can see this is Garnacho for Man United. He's obviously in movement. He's, you know, in the middle of, he's clearly come to a bit of a stop and jinking with the ball. And it's nice because he's sharp. And a lot of the times, if I'm shooting with low ISO films, I have to compensate by making the shutter speed slower. Something like his right foot would be blurry, or maybe the ball would be blurry as it's moving. So anyway, I liked how this composition came out. I like the pose he's striking and the fact that you can sort of see him in motion, and the fact that I think that the settings of the camera were just about right for this as well, which is great. It's one of the other things when you're shooting film at sports games is obviously you can't see what you've got, so there's always that nerve-wracking moment at the end of a game. I get it all the time when other photographers will come up to me and say, "Oh, so did you get some good stuff from today?" And I'll be like, "I've got no idea, maybe." So anyway, luckily this all went well. So that's another shot from that same game. Now moving on. So I know I said I was going to talk about expired film, and at this moment I thought I'd talk about expired versus fresh film. So this is a shot I was shooting for the FA Cup. This is when Man United won the FA Cup. So this is them lifting the trophy. And if I flick on in a second, this was shot on an expired roll. I think this was of Kodak Color Plus. I'm sure that's a film stock a lot of you have shot in the past. So that's 200 ISO, which obviously is a lot less than the other Delta 3200 we saw here. And I think with this, although you can see the varying conditions that these were shot in, this was a night game under floodlights, and this was obviously during the day, and it's much more sunny, so there's a lot more light. So I felt like I could get away with using expired film, but I just thought I'd take a second, if none of you have shot expired film before, to give you a bit of a lowdown on how to get the best out of an expired roll of film. So over time, film kind of gets less and less sensitive to light, which is why it has an expiry date. So obviously film is a chemical emulsion, and it's a little bit like medicine in a funny way, in that it's best kept in cold environments like a fridge or a freezer, so that the degradation of those chemicals gets slowed, but still over time film does degrade. So that's why on film rolls there'll always be an expiry date on the box, and I kind of see that less as a use by date but as a best by date, if that makes any sense. So even if film goes past its expiry date, it's still very usable as long as you just adjust your camera settings to get the best out of it. So for this one, there's a very rough rule you can find online, I'm sure if you look it up, which is that everybody recommends that you overexpose expired film by 1 stop per decade since it expired, if that makes any sense at all. So for this shot in particular, I was using a 200 ISO roll of Kodak Color Plus, which expired in about 2014. So judging by the rule, if you wanted to expose it properly, you want to overexpose it to compensate for that lack of sensitivity over time. And so what I would do with this is I would go to my camera. So for this one, I was using my Canon F1, which I've got right in front of me here. And obviously on most cameras like these SLRs, there'll be a little dial on the top where you can move it, and you can tell the camera what ISO the film is that you've got loaded in. So what I would do is set that. So let's say I'm shooting a 200 ISO roll of film that expired 10 years ago, using the 1 stop per decade rule, I would set my camera to 100 ISO, which means that the camera will think the film is less sensitive than it was when it was fresh. And so the settings it offers you will overexpose it by that amount. I saw somebody leave a question there saying, is it the same for black and white as color? Yes, it is the same for black and white. It's the same for negative film. Slide film is a little bit different because it expires weirdly. I'll get onto that in a bit. But the negative film, whether it's black and white negative or color negative, I say 1 stop per decade is a good rough rule to follow. The reason I say rough rule is that, like I mentioned earlier, with film, it's best when it's stored in cold environments. And so for film that you're shooting and you don't know how it's been stored, I always think it's best to err on the side of overexposure than underexposure. So for this roll of Color Plus, I knew that it had been stored quite well, and it was only 10 years old, so I thought it was quite safe with only overexposing it by 1 stop. A stop, by the way, in terms of ISO is half of the previous ISO number, if that makes sense. So this was 200 ISO, so to overexpose it by 1 stop, I would set the camera to 100 ISO. If I wanted to overexpose it by 2 stops, I set it to 50, and then to 25, and vice versa. So I would say, yeah, always err on the side of overexposure. Now, as you can see from this image here, I actually think it's come out a little bit underexposed for my liking. There are reasons for that, one of which, like I mentioned earlier, is that I wanted to keep the shutter speeds fast, and particularly with this one, when the players like pumping their fists and lifting the trophy into the air, there's a lot of fast movement going on there. So I kept the shutter speed faster, but I think I've sacrificed a little bit of light sensitivity because of that. So it looks a little bit underexposed. If I compare it now, I'll move on to another slide where I shot with some fresh film. Here's a shot I took of, this is Lisandro Martinez for Manchester United lifting the trophy on some fresh film. I believe this was potentially Kodak Ultramax, so that'd be 400 ISO film. And so you can just see between the two what happens with expired film. It comes a little bit more washed out, more grainy, obviously, because that gets accentuated over time. So comparing the expired shot to a fresh shot here, you can see the colors are a bit more defined. It's a little bit sharper and things like that as well. But I would say that this stylistically could be a fun thing to work with in certain times. And also the thing to bear in mind with expired film is that one roll expires completely different to the next. You're never quite sure what you get. That's one of the things I love about shooting expired film, is that every roll, even if they're the same two films, one of them might have been treated slightly differently to the other when it's been stored, and they can conjure up different effects as they expire, which I think is great. But anyway, so that's a fresh roll, and that's an expired roll of the exact same setting, same scenario, same lighting conditions, all that sort of thing. So obviously the one thing to consider with expired film is how it's been stored. The other thing, and this is what makes it a little bit more complicated when shooting expired film, is that the higher the ISO of the film you're shooting, the quicker and kind of more it will have degraded over time. And that's something to bear in mind too. So with this roll of Color Plus 200, I was quite confident that it wouldn't have expired too much, being a low ISO film and only being 10 years old. But if I move on, so there's the next photo here, you'll see this was shot on a roll of Kodak VR 1000, so it's 1000 ISO film, and this expired in the early 90s. I believe it was 1992, and you can see from this, obviously, so I shot this in Italy. This is a bright sunny day, like loads of light, and you can see how grainy this has come out. And so with this one, I overexposed it a lot, because I knew that if it was a higher ISO film, it would have degraded more, and being that old. So I think I actually shot this at 25 ISO, even though originally this was a 1000 ISO color film, which, by the way, I wish we still had nowadays, because that would do me a huge favor when I'm shooting football, but never mind. But so you can see how much it's expired. Obviously, being from the early 90s, there's all that time that's gone by as well, but because it was so sensitive when it was fresh, it means that it's expired even more. So that's another thing to bear in mind when you're shooting expired film, is that the higher the ISO, the more you should probably overexpose it. So let's say on this next slide here, this was shot on a lower ISO film, but again, this was shot at night, and you can see this is one of the music shots that I took. And again, this would have been really overexposed. You can see the grain that's come out of it. I kind of actually, this is one of the things I was saying earlier, like stylistically with expired film, I actually kind of love how this shot has come out. I wouldn't have been able to predict how it came out at all, which again for me is one of the beauties of shooting expired film. But you can see, so obviously the singer, I shot this at a music festival in Helsinki last year, but you can see that the singer is backlit by the lighting behind her, and at that time in the set, I guess the lighting engineer has not illuminated her face with light. So there's not a lot of light going on here when you're shooting film. This is one of the things, like I said, with exposing expired film, is that the more light is your friend, the more light the better, basically. So this was kind of a situation where I'm not sure I really should have been shooting expired film, but this exactly demonstrates to me what I love about it, because I've got this shot that's come out that, I don't know, it kind of looks like I couldn't have ever envisaged this shot coming out like this. Obviously, you've got the kind of natural vignette that's been formed by the lights behind her and the fog on the stage. And although outside of that, it should just be pure black, you've got this crazy grain, like colorful grain, which is only there because this roll is probably quite severely expired. And I'm sure, I haven't actually looked at the negatives for this one in a while, but I'm sure that many of the photos on this roll wouldn't have come out at all like this, probably been unusable. But for that one photo, this is one of my favorite music photos I've ever taken. It's very striking to me. And again, it's only because I shot it on expired film that it's come out this way, I think, which I really love. But with that in mind, that's one of the things I try to do when I'm shooting expired film, is to try and not absolutely rely on it, if you see what I mean. So for this one, and for that one of the Manchester United team holding the FA Cup, those were moments where I had plenty of backup shots on fresh film, so I knew that I could experiment with it a bit. If I had like a really important, very specific shoot that I had to do, I wouldn't necessarily call upon expired film as the first thing I would use, unless that's what the client was after, because there's an even higher chance that it's not going to come out perfect, which is a negative and a positive of shooting expired film for me. So again, here, this is a shot on what was clearly a very extremely expired roll of film. Again, I think this might have been a roll of Color Plus, actually, which just shows you the difference and how different rolls of film can expire. And again, stylistically, this look is something I would never have even thought of if I was even editing like a digital photo to make this effect. And I'm not kind of even sure 100% how this would have happened. To me, it looks like there might be some light piping on it, so you can see obviously the top and the bottom of the frame are blown out, and something's happened with the chemicals on the film to make the color sensitivity really only be like red and yellow for some reason. I've got no idea how this happened, but again, this for me just describes perfectly the beauty of shooting expired film, because I'm looking at this, and I mean, personally, obviously photography, as any art, is very subjective. But I love the effect of this. I kind of love the strike that the singer's post. This is Mahalia. She's a singer from London, and I love the pose that she's striking. It looks kind of red scale. That's true. I don't think it was red scale, because I'm pretty sure it was still in the box, but it does have that effect. So you're right. Yeah, and so I just stylistically, again, like I wouldn't have ever predicted how this would have come out. And if I was shooting on fresh film, obviously, I think it still would have been quite a cool photo, because I think I just caught the singer at a fun moment where her hair's kind of going everywhere and she's holding the microphone at a good point. And I like her pose. But this color scheme and the craziness of it only came about by shooting expired film, which I really love. Moving on, and speaking of generally shooting film, obviously there's the risk that I'm sure we've all been there with film. Something's gone wrong that we weren't intending in the camera, where I don't know, the film wasn't loaded properly, or you open the back when the film was in there. There's light leaks and things. But this was shot with a fresh roll of film, actually. But what I hadn't realised is the camera clearly wasn't winding on properly, and so what I've done here is got a completely unintentional double exposure of, this is Marcus Rashford again for Manchester United, and he's double exposed with the crowd behind him, and it's one of those things that yeah, exactly, Laura. Yes, it's a very happy accident, as Bob Ross would say, and that's one of the things I love about shooting film. And I know I'm using this as a way of sort of showing off a fresh film photo, but it's the same thing. I think when you're shooting any sort of film, there's an element of surprise, and there's even that, you know, once you send your film off to the lab and there's that sense of anticipation about what you might get back from the scans, there's always that element of surprise with film, and this was a complete surprise to me when it came back, which I'm very happy with how it did come out. But with expired film, that's accentuated even more, I think, because, you know, you are waiting for the scans to come back and you've got no idea what they might look like. This one, yeah, was just one of those moments where I just got quite lucky, I suppose. I mean, what was funny was when I got these scans back from Analogue WonderLand, who are obviously my favorite lab in the entire world. I got the scans back, and I was looking through the scans from this roll, and I was quite disappointed, because I was like, oh damn it, like all of these shots have been double exposed. And my first reaction when I saw this photo was, oh no, because I really liked what the photo might have been if Marcus Rashford was not double exposed. But then the more I looked at it, the more I was kind of like, you know what, this is actually really unique and cool, and it's turned out in a funny way to be one of my favorite photos that I've taken recently, which has been nice. So before we round up, I'm just going to show you some of the other places I've shot some film. This was a commission I got for Real Madrid. So I shot for them because they're wearing the special fourth kit that have been designed for them. This is Jude Bellingham, who some of you might have seen score for England at the Euros of the day. And this was one of my favorite shots. This was used in the campaign for Adidas, actually, which was great because, so you can see they're wearing the special fourth kit that was designed by a Japanese designer. So I went over to Spain to the Bernabeu to shoot this. This was definitely shot on Lomography 800 color film, which is one of my choice films to use when I'm shooting sports, particularly at night. As you can see, this game was shot at night. And I mean, any of the 800 ISO color films really are great. You've got the Lomography 800, you've got Kodak Portrait 800, of course. And I really actually like the new flick film Aurora 800, which I've been shooting a lot of recently. But obviously 800 ISO is the highest you can get with color films nowadays, and always higher ISO stuff for late night games, the better. This was on lomography 800. I have a feeling this was probably with my Canon EOS 1V and the 70-200 again, just looking at the sort of distance I am from him and the way the background's out of focus. This is one I shot of Cristiano Ronaldo. So recently I went over to Saudi Arabia to shoot a game there. Cristiano Ronaldo obviously plays out there for a team called Al Nassr, and this was just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be able to shoot Ronaldo in the flesh. This is him celebrating after he'd scored a penalty in a penalty shootout. And again, this most likely would have been taken with lomography 800. Although actually looking at it, I think it might have been the flick film Aurora 800. Thank you, Xander. So yeah, this was a nice moment to capture in time. Again, this was definitely, I think, on my EOS 1V and the 70-200 2.8, which I really love using. And this one, just finally to conclude before I take any questions from you guys, this is my favorite shot from the first ever football match that I shot professionally. And this was shot on expired film, actually. I believe this was an expired roll of Kentmere 400 that I pushed hugely in development. You can tell I developed this at home myself and scanned it and didn't send it off to Analogue WonderLab because it's very dusty and stuff like that. But I kind of love this as a frame. Do I also shoot on digital? No, I did. Funnily enough, for this game. So this was the first game I ever shot for a sports team professionally, and I did take my digital camera and shoot stuff on the day there, but I quickly realized that nobody really wants that from me because you're on the touchline and you're surrounded by 20-25 other photographers all in a very similar position to you, and if you're shooting digital they'll all be getting a very similar shot to you. And obviously with them, they're working for agencies like Getty or Alamy and stuff, and so that stuff, it just goes straight to the clients. So I did to start with, but then I just sort of realized that it wasn't what people are employing me for. And so obviously, and I prefer shooting film just as a medium. I just love doing it. So no, it's weird now. I find it such a weird juxtaposition with me in that I shoot analog film and really old cameras with the sole aim really that all the results are going to be posted on social media. It's a very weird combination in my head. But yeah, so this is my favorite shot from my first game that I shot for Fulham. And then I think finally I've got one more, which is, this would be my proudest moment. Just quickly answer, my favorite spot pitch side. So always, if I'm shooting for a team, what you want to do is you want to go behind the goal that the team you're shooting for is shooting at, if that makes any sense, behind the goal, and then kind of quite close to the corner flag. That's where I like to be. So for example, when I was shooting for Real Madrid, what you do is you'd find out which end they were shooting towards in the first half, and I'd position myself there. So I normally like to be behind the goal they're shooting towards and closer to the corner flag, and then I'd switch ends at half time, so I'd be at the end they're shooting towards then. So anyway, but this is a photo I'm probably most proud of. I know I've been waffling on for ages, so I'll wrap up and take some questions in a minute. But this one I was commissioned by this team, AIK, who have been playing in the Swedish First Division now for 100 years. It was the 100th anniversary of the league this season, and for the anniversary they released this special centenary kit, which is an almost exact replica of the kit they first wore 100 years ago. So Pro Direct Soccer and me and the club had this idea to go and shoot their team photo at the start of the game on a camera, which I have here, that is 100 years old. So this was really fun. This has been one of my favorite pieces of content I've ever done, actually, because I'll show you the camera. If you've followed me on social media for a bit, you might have seen it before, but this is a number 4 cartridge Kodak from 1897. So the front of it pops open like this, and then you pull out the bellows and it kind of looks like this, which is a crazy camera to use. But so they wanted me to shoot this team photo on this, which was a mad thing. So basically, to focus this, you pull the bellows back and forth, and I'll try and show you on the camera, but on the plate here, there's numbers that tell you how far away you're focusing in feet and meters. So before the game, my brother Dylan came out and helped me with this. We paced out how far away the team were going to be to where I was going to stand with this camera, and we measured it was 40 feet. So I set the focus on here to 40 feet. I got the settings all right. So this shot was actually taken on Ilford Delta 3200 as well. And set the camera up with the settings. You've got basically the shutter speeds you control here, which are just slow, medium, and fast. And you've got the aperture ring around the top of this metal panel here, and it goes down. What's the minimum aperture on this again? I can't remember. It goes down to f4. So I set it all up, and then the only way you got to compose a photo is a tiny window here. Anyway, the team lined up. I composed it, make sure everything was okay, fired the shutter once, and then the team were like, all right, that's it. And they ran away. And I was like, oh my God, I've literally got one single photo of this moment. I hope it comes out all right. And luckily it did. The journey home was not fun because I traveled with it in my hand luggage as well, the film, to kind of bring back to Analogue WonderLand to develop. And it was a nerve-wracking time. But yeah, I just thought I'd end on that to show one of my prouder moments. Can we see your? Oh, sorry. Yes, I tell you what. If I stop sharing the screen, I'll show you the cameras now, so that you can see more about those. If that helps.
Right, I will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But so that was that. So this is the camera here. This is the. So it's called a #4 cartridge Kodak. I actually found it. Me and my wife were in an antique store. I can't actually remember where it was now, but she spotted this on the shelf and was like, "Wow, Miles, look at that!" And I looked at it and I was like, "It looks in incredibly good condition for a camera that's over 100 years old." And amazingly, it literally worked. It worked perfectly. Does it shoot regular sheet film? So actually, what this was designed for, and in fact, I'll show you right now. So originally, this was designed for Kodak 104 film, which is basically, I've got some in my film fridge down here, so I'll show you. It's basically 4x5 sheet film, but on a roll with a paper backing, which obviously doesn't exist anymore, which is a shame. But I managed, here it is, a single roll of this online. So this is an original roll of film for that camera. And if I show you here, this expired in 1920. So in this box is an original roll of 104 film. It has 6 exposures, and yeah, it's basically 4x5 sheet film on a roll. So if I show you what I've done with this, in the back of the camera, we've still got the 4x5 kind of framing. But what I've done is I've managed to find somebody on eBay 3D prints adapters for it. So I've adapted it to use 120 film basically. If I just take these out, I can show you the back. That's what it looks like inside. So that's a 4x5, sort of frame. So that's how big the negatives would have been originally. But I found this guy who 3D prints these adapters, and so I pop these in here, and it enables me to use 120 film with it. It comes out as a bit of a panorama in that way because it means it doesn't fill up the whole frame. Yeah, #4. It's called a #4 cartridge Kodak. So you get a bit of a panorama because the film obviously doesn't fill the whole frame. I have experimented before with just taping one sheet of 4x5 film in here, which actually works quite well. But when I'm shooting, a game or something, it's not very practical because I have to do that all in a dark bag, and so it's difficult, obviously, when you're at a game to not see what you're doing, take the thing on there and like that. So yeah, but you can technically, and obviously that would take a plate as well, I think, as well. So that's one of my more proud moments of stuff coming out of the professional shoots I've done recently. But so if anybody has any questions, then Amy, very happy to answer anything whilst I'm here.
Yes, I did send you a document earlier that has a load that people submitted on the form.
Oh, okay, cool.
Let me on email.
Yeah, okay, I'll grab that now. Sorry, I should have had that up already. So yeah, I'll check in on the questions. Okay, so is there any way to get more out of expired slide film? I'm glad somebody brought this up because I know I mentioned that I was going to talk about this. So slide film, in my experience, I found it's quite difficult and very varied compared to negative film. I don't know exactly why that is. It must be the way the chemicals work, but I found that expired slide film can be really, really difficult to gauge. What I tend to do mostly with slide film, actually, that's expired, is I cross-process it in C41, which kind of makes the colors pop more. It gets a lot more contrast, but I found it's slightly more reliable than trying to process it as a positive. So that's the only recommendation I'd say with that. There's also, you don't have to overcompensate with the exposure quite as much with expired slide film. But I've always found it quite difficult to work with myself. So I tend to not use it very much unless it's fairly recently expired and unless you can cross-process it as C41, in which case you get a negative back anyway. So that's what I would recommend doing. I have I've processed some sorry, there's an alarm going off. Process of expired slide film as slide film before, and yeah, if it's recently expired and again fairly low ISO, it's been quite good. So I've had some Kodak Elite Chrome before that's come out quite nicely, processed as C41, sorry, processed as E6. But yeah, otherwise I think you get the best out of it by cross-processing it myself. Obviously, you know, like I say, it makes the colors pop more, but if you're shooting expired and you want a kind of wacky look, then yeah, I would say that. Some of your night shots have a darker look. Is this purposely done by underexposing? Not necessarily. It's just yeah, it's just when you're at a game and shooting at night, obviously it is a little bit darker. And with film, I always try and keep the shutter speeds high. So I guess yeah, there's possibly a little bit more of that kind of. What I try to do is make sure that the players are nice and illuminated, and if the background's a little bit darker, then I think it tends to make them pop a little bit more. Okay, next question. Will you publish a book of your music and football photography? Funny you should say that, because I am in the works of doing that right now. I'm also in the works of getting a print store done on my website. So yes, is the short answer to that. I'm not exactly when it will be, but yeah, at some point in the near future, hoping to do a coffee table book, and also definitely before then, you'll be able to buy prints on my website. That should be done in the next few weeks, I'm hoping. So yeah, I've been so busy with shooting stuff whilst the season's been on that I've now got all my favorite photos together. I'm going to try and take the time to do that. Then I missed one in the chat as well. Have you ever tried to use expired color negative film that's old enough to be pre C41? Yeah, so I have. It's difficult to get good results out of. I did get something out of some stuff where I processed it in C41 chemistry at room temperature. So a lot of the films that were made color negative before C41 existed, they can't deal with the high temperatures that C41 gets developed at. So I developed it at room temperature. I think I developed it for like 10 or 20 minutes, and I did get something. It wasn't, I'd say, necessarily usable, but there was something there. Yeah. Do you think they're going back to analog and large scale as subconscious response? As yeah, I do. Sorry, I'll read this properly. As a subconscious response as a society to the AI quick development. I do. I think what it is, I don't think it's necessarily just down to AI either. I think it's just a reaction to a kind of digital age in a funny way. I think it's exactly the same as with vinyl in the music industry. I think now people consume music and photography by just looking at it on a screen or on their phones, and I think it's really nice with analog photography that you are so like involved in the entire process. I think it's exactly the same with vinyl, with music. You know, when you're taking the vinyl out of the sleeve and you're putting it on the record player, I think it's the same with film photography, in that when you're shooting it, you know, you're looking at the design of the box, and you're taking the film out and you're popping it open and you're putting it in the back of a camera and you're physically winding it on. And I just think it feels like you're so much more involved. I feel like you pour a bit of your soul into every photo you take with the film camera. And also, well, first of all, it looks really cool and grainy and vintage, but also I think it's nice that you know, in a day and age where you can go to a concert or go on holiday and you take like 200 photos with your iPhone, like post a few on a little photo dump on Instagram and kind of never look at them again. And I love with film photography that it really makes you remember the moments a lot more clearly, I think. So you can remember that moment where you loaded that film. And also because you've only got 24 or 36 exposures, I think it makes the photos that you take better as well, because you've got to be so much more choiceful about the photos you're taking. So yeah, I do think in a roundabout way, I do think it's a bit of a, yeah, like a response to AI and the digital age and all that sort of stuff as well. So Kasim was saying, how can you bring an SLR camera without being a professional? What I've tended to find with getting into sports stadiums, if you're just going in as a fan, and this isn't a general rule, it honestly just depends on what the security staff are like at the stadium you're going to. But I found if you can get away with bringing an SLR in with a kind of short prime lens, let's say like a 50mm or something like that, what security staff tend to do is they'll see a zoom lens and they'll assume that it's professional, which is a shame, obviously, because you're going to want a zoom lens to try and get closer to the action and stuff. And I have managed to squeeze them in from time to time at stadiums. But most of the time, if you rock up with an old film camera, an SLR, like a, you know, whatever you might have, Pentax K1000 or a Canon AE1 with like a 50mm or a 35 or a 28mm on it, most of the time I found the security tend to look at it and think it's not professional. And also, if they don't, you can try and argue your case a little bit and say it's an old film camera. I'm not going to use it professionally, whatever. So that's, in my experience, the best way. That's absolutely not a fail-safe way. And I have been I say turned away. Normally what you do, the worst case scenario when I've got to a stadium is that they'll just say, you're going to have to put it in a locker. And there's normally a locker space where you can put your bag, and you normally have to pay like £5 or £10 to put it in there, which is a pain. But I found that, yeah, if you have a smaller lens on, if you can get away with it, that tends to work. The flip side of that is that I've actually got some nice results from the crowd with a point and shoot with a zoom lens. So I wonder if I've got any with me, but like Pentax has done a couple of, like, I think they're called IQ zooms or something like that, or you can get like Canon Sure Shot zooms, which have a zoom lens. Obviously, it's not the best lens in the world, but if you load some like Ilford Delta 3200 or the Lomography 800, I found you can get some quite good results with those as well, because it looks just like a point and shoot when you bring it in. They're much more likely to let you in with that. So there's two rough tips, but again, I wouldn't say there's a fail-safe way of getting into any stadium in the world with a film camera in that way. So there's a bit of luck on the day as well. There's a question in the chat. If you're traveling by air with your films, how are you getting on with the new generation screening equipment? Yes, this is worry. So I have found mostly, actually, that obviously there's only a few select airports that have these new CT scanners, and so far every time I've been to one and I've had film with me, I go to the security staff and I say, is it possible to hand search this? This is camera film. And they've said yes without asking every single time. I hope that's because they're starting to train the staff that these new, more powerful scanners will damage film. And so far it's been okay. There are two ways to get around it for me, in that I have, I always bring with me a roll of Ilford Delta 3200 to show to the security, because they'll always say, well, I've had it a lot of times where they say, oh, film 800 ISO and below won't get damaged by the scanners, which is not true, by the way. Don't let them tell you that. But so I'll always then say, oh, but look, I've got some 3200 ISO. It's more sensitive, and that tends to help with them hand searching it, which is good. And then also I do have one of these Domke bags. I don't think I've got it on me right now, but they're like lead-lined Velcro bags, which if they point blank refuse to hand search it, it does help with the X-ray radiation, and sort of limiting it as much as possible in that way. Yeah, so Casio Sure Shot 105 or Pentax 105, yeah, one of those. Give it a try. Make sure you got some nice high ISO films, because those lenses, the aperture is quite high on them, especially when you zoom in. So you need that high ISO film to get the most out of the light.
Miles, Emmy has raised their hand.
Sorry, yes, Emmy, go for it. If you stick it in the chat, I guess would be the best way. In the meantime, you'd love to land some agency work shooting larger games. Is it possible to shoot at some places without representing an agency? Yeah. So I don't represent an agency. I'm just myself. I mean, I'm very lucky in that I had the social media following. So I think I get employed because it's so funny with me. Like it's twofold what I offer, because I give people obviously the vintage, film grainy photos, but I also offer them social media exposure, which I'm very lucky for. But no, you don't have to represent an agency. In terms of that, like, I found that if you go along to local games to start with, shooting film for a start is a bit of a USP. And I think that some smaller teams, so where I live in Oxfordshire, I've been along to a couple of Oxford United games. Obviously this is unpaid to start with, and they might be able to cover your expenses. But if you approach teams like that and say, oh, I can come along and shoot the game on film for you to use on social media or whatever that might be, I found that that's a nice way in, and then you can start to work your way up from there. Yeah, so that's what I would say. I don't know if I've got the question from Emmy yet, so I'll work down the bullet points you've sent, Amy, before I get there. Where do you acquire your expired film? This is a good question. Oh, here we go. Emmy's she just wanted to share about experience in the Spanish airport. Yeah, you know what? I think actually the worst time I've had was in Madrid airport with film. They really did not want to hand search my film at Madrid, so I can attest that as well. So yeah, where do I acquire my expired film? This has changed a lot, and I have to say I might be partly to blame for this, so I apologize, but it's getting a lot more difficult to get hold of. To start with, you could browse eBay and you could find like lots of expired film for really cheap. Nowadays, eBay's still a great way to do it. eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, all those like auction sites are great. And that's where I'd say you're probably likely going to get your best bet with expired film, is places like that. For a while, I had a couple of suppliers that would send me film from like Morocco and places like that. But honestly, with expired film, I think your best bet is an eBay or a Facebook Marketplace. Otherwise, I always like to go into camera shops and film labs wherever I am. So I travel quite a lot, so I'd always go in, and actually some of the best deals I found ever, I was in Budapest randomly a couple of years ago, and found a really cool film camera shop and lab there, and they had some expired I think it was Europrint, and they were selling them for like €1.80 a roll, and I actually paid for FedEx to send me, like, I think they had like 500 rolls or something. Anyway, that was my best win. But honestly, I think auction sites are good. Facebook Marketplace is great because it's often people that are on there that are just like trying to get rid of stuff, and I found some good deals on there. So it's always just worth like searching around as much as you can. Hand searching films does pose a security headache, and the aviation security industry hasn't formally addressed it yet. Yeah, I agree. CT is rolling out quickly, so we do need to have a more open discussion. So on all of this, actually, I might put this in the chat now, because there's a great film photographer and YouTuber called Lena Bessanova. I don't know whether you guys have come across her before, but she has a fantastic video on testing how film scanners affect film. I'm just going to have a look at it now quickly, and I'll put it in the chat, because it's the most informative video I've seen on how film and scanners get affected and stuff like that, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. So let me just see if I can find the let's see, the advice for it. I'm going to put this in the chat. I think this is the one, because it's so helpful, and I think it just gives you a bit of an idea about like how best to deal with security. I've just put it in the chat now. Hopefully it'll come up on there. Anyway, it's great. And she also then, if you look in the description of the video, she's now got a I'm going to post this as well. There's a couple of videos she's got on this topic, and she's got a website page where she goes through all of the different airports that she's been to, and how they test film and how you can get around it and stuff. It's really, really valuable. And I've used that a lot. Hang on, I'm just going to see if there's a way of putting that link in there. Let me see. But here we go. Yeah, I'll put that in the chat as well. Anyway, it's very, very much worth having a watch of that, and Lean is awesome, so it's definitely well worth having a look at that. Okay, so which films perform best, how black and white compares to color. So roughly covered this earlier on, but in order, if we're talking about expired film here, black and white negative film tends to hold up the best over time, then color negative, then color positive. So black and white negative film, I've actually shot some black and white film from the 1940s and still managed to get usable results out of it. It's pretty amazing. And also because the chemistry hasn't changed loads over time, so you tend to be able to get decent results as long as you overexpose it, like I explained earlier on, as much as you can. Black and white negative film tends to hold it the best over time. And yeah, I've always found that you can get some decent results of that, especially because as time goes back, film was much less sensitive. So those lower ISO black and white films, they hold up great, I would say. Okay, how do you manage to get noticed and get to shoot the level of games that you shoot? So yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate in that I built a social media following first, in a funny way. I mean, I've always been a photographer and everything like that, but like I was saying when we started this, I got quite lucky with my content and how big things seem to go quite quickly. So I guess it's quite good for me in that, like I was saying, I can offer taking these professional photos on film of sporting events and all that sort of stuff, but also that social media exposure, I guess. So the two of them combined seem to give me a bit of a USP in a funny way. But honestly, otherwise, it's just about grafting. It's the same as with a lot of stuff. I just shoot all the time. I before I started doing it professionally, I would go along to concerts or to games and just shoot some stuff, and then after the game, you can like try and get hold of a club on social media or send them an email and just say, hey, I took these photos of the game. If you'd like them, you can use them. And it's just about building those relationships up. And once teams and people at teams start to know you and know your work, then there's likely to be opportunities that come out of that. I think for all of us, shooting film is a great place to be right now, because I think it just sets you apart that little bit more. And if you're able to shoot film, obviously the downside of it is how expensive it is, especially if you're just doing it for a hobby. But that's the way, like I explained earlier, like for me, I would get in touch with Oxford United, who are close to me, although they've just been promoted to the Championship, so maybe they're a bit less likely to have space at the games now. But when they're in League One, if there are lower teams than that, just reach out and just say, hey, I was wondering if I could come down and shoot the game on film on Saturday, and they'd hopefully be able to get you some accreditation so that you could be pitch side. And so you could go about it that way, and then just start to build a relationship. And if there's moments where you get that brilliant shot and the club are like, this is awesome, thank you so much, and they'll post it, then it just starts that relationship. Thank you. This is something to say about the t-shirt. It is available. If you go on my Instagram, click on my what's it called? There's a link in my bio, Linktree, and there's a link that takes you through to there's another company who do it called Photogenic, who are great, by the way, and they're for sale on there. Yeah. So another question about the same sort of thing. Where can I look to find opportunities to get involved with sports and events photography? So again, and actually, one of the things I guess that helps me with my stuff, with the sporting side of it as well, is if you just go to games. I mean, we've talked about this a bit, but if you just go to games, bring a point and shoot, and shoot some stuff from the stands, maybe create a bit of content around that. That's how I went about it anyway. And if the club then sees it on social media and likes it, that's how everything started with me. Is I went to this Fulham game, took a point and shoot, did one of my typical videos where I showed myself loading the film when I sat in the stands, and then looked through the viewfinder and then showed the results. And I was again lucky that Fulham saw it as a club, and they DM'd me and they're like, oh, can we repost this and give you credit? Which I obviously said yes to, and then it built up a conversation from there, really. So it's all about just putting yourself out there and getting as much as you can done. I realise I've got lots of questions to get through, Amy, so I'm sorry. Let me carry on here. Right, how do you get with manually focusing at such long lenses? This is out of everything, I would say that's probably the most difficult part of shooting sports on film. Because I've got a big 300mm at 2.8. I'll dig in my pack here and get it out for you. Which obviously, so when you're wide open at 2.8 and you're trying to photograph some fast moving action, it is difficult. And I don't know necessarily. Actually, here it is. This is my beast of a lens. So I don't know that necessarily there's actually a technique that I would say works better than others. So this is what it looks like here. It's an absolutely gorgeous lens. Again, I found this on Facebook Marketplace. Honestly, Facebook Marketplace is an absolute godsend.
Seems to be your go-to, doesn't it?
But so what I tend to do is I do actually just follow the action. So if this will be on a monopod with my camera body here, and I tend to use my thumb here to just be constantly on the focus the whole time. And you've just got to pick your moments, basically. It's all about intuition. And what I found actually is on football and stuff and sports that I know well, that helps because I can kind of predict where the action is going to go and try and predict where to focus with my thumb as I go. I saw Emmy's raised a hand again, so Emmy, please stick something in the chat if you have another question. I'll get to answering that. What's your relationship with film brands? Yes, so I actually have a very good relationship with Ilford, who they do supply me with film, which is fantastic. So they have sent me a load of Ilford Delta 3200. As you can probably tell, I shoot that a lot. So I've got a film fridge down to my left-hand side, which is full of that right now, which is great. In return for me tagging them and giving them credit on stuff that I shoot with that film. What makes the Canon F1 a chosen camera for shooting sporting events? I wouldn't say there's any reason particularly apart from I've always shot Canon cameras. I just like the way they operate. So here's the Canon. So this Canon F1 I've got with a power winder attached to it. So when I turn this on, you can get kind of a few frames a second, which is helpful when you're shooting sport and trying to capture the action. The Canon F1 for me personally, I love the ergonomics of it. I love its modularity, the fact that you can swap out the viewfinders for different things, which is great. The fact that it goes up to a 2,000th of a second on the shutter speed is very handy as well. I think actually this was the first camera that Canon ever produced with a view to it being used professionally in sporting and news environments. Also, the FD range of lenses is just miraculous. I mean, this 300mm f2.8 that I have here is just so awesome, and there are loads and loads of FD mount lenses that you can use with these, which is great. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's a particular reason. It's funny, I've always been a Canon shooter over Nikon for some reason. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's any reason particularly apart from those. Any advice for aspiring photographers trying to get into the field of sports photography? I think we've sort of kind of covered that, have we, Amy? Do you think the photographers at sporting events who are shooting digital ever look down or question me? This is funny. So yeah, I do get some funny looks, and I definitely get some questions. It's a complete difference in that the older photographers who've been doing it for decades look at me and they're like, why the hell are you still shooting film? Like, I'm so glad that we don't have to do that anymore. And then the younger photographers are kind of like, oh my god, you're shooting film, I've never seen someone do that, that's really cool, which is a funny juxtaposition. But I wouldn't say anyone ever looks down on me. It is a spark of conversation though. It's funny, when I was shooting at the Fulham game, there was a photographer there who'd been doing it for a long time, and he said, you know, when film was the norm, when you're shooting games, there'd be a specific point through the half where you get a tap on your shoulder as a photographer, and this guy would come out and you'd hand him all the rolls that you've shot so far, and he'd dash off like backstage into the stadium to process all the films to get them sent out to print straight away, which I thought was just really interesting to think about that happening at football games. How long have we got, Amy? Should I carry on answering some questions? Or
how many more questions have you got?
Maybe 8 or 9.
Okay, maybe pick 3. 3 of your favourite ones.
I'll tell you what, I'll answer the ones that are quick to answer. How many rolls do I typically get through at each match or event? It depends on how much action there is, but I'd say somewhere between 10 and 20 a game. My record is 24 rolls of film shot at a game, which is a lot. Do you need expensive lenses? No, I would say. I mean, obviously this one is quite expensive, but compared to digital lenses, they're not expensive at all. I can't remember how much this cost me, but I also have other zoom lenses that are the aperture on them slightly worse. So this one is I think this is like a 28 to 85 f4, and I've also got 70 to 200 f4 as well, which they work great. In fact, some of my favorite photos I've taken have been on those lenses. So no, I wouldn't say, obviously it helps, but I wouldn't say you need them necessarily. But I'm going to go down here. Whether Miles thinking he's shooting sports on film can be commercially viable. It depends on how you approach it. I'm lucky because I've got the sort of social media following, I would say. I would say I've answered most of everything else. A lot of it's how to go about getting into shooting sports on film, which I think we've covered a bit. But if there are any other questions, then please let me know. We need Harlan to challenge Kodak at 800 speeds. Yeah, I agree. What I would love is for somebody to start making some higher ISO color film, but I don't see it happening personally. But if there are any other questions, please let me know. Is Emmy, is that the same question from the film branch with her hand raised from before, Amy, do you think?
Yeah, possibly.
Okay.
Yeah, still raised.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, any other questions, please let me know. Otherwise, this has been really great. Thanks for having me, Amy. Sorry I waffled on for so long.
No, that's good. You've got so much to talk about. No, it's been really interesting.
Also, James, curious what your favourite kit has been to shoot in terms of colour. Do you mean like a football kit? I guess you do. Ooh, that's tough, actually. I hadn't really even considered that. No, actually, I have considered it. I know exactly which one it is. It's a kit that Genoa wore in Italy. It's like it's split into quarters, and it's like navy blue and dark red, and it looks so perfect on film. So I'd say that one. Yeah.
Nice. All right, we'll probably wrap it up there then. But thank you guys for your questions. That was really great. And yeah, thank you, Miles.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Super interesting. Appreciate your time. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Like Miles said, if you've got any further questions, just pop them a message on Instagram or send us something and we'll pass it on.
Pop me a follow at Expired Film Club. And yeah, if you have anything you'd like to ask, then please just whack it in a DM or something.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers then. Thank you.
Bye.